for having this hearing, and for our witnesses, and the chairman for his work in this area, extensive work in this area. Mr. Concanon, how much money is spent annually on the food stamp program? How much is spent annually?
Total expenditure, including administration, $75 billion.
$75 billion. You know what it was 8 years ago?
No, I do not.
The chart I'm looking at says it was less than half of that.
Well, that was
37.
before the deep recession the country went through, so I'm not surprised by that.
A lot of people would say we were in a recession in 7 and 8. I'm looking at that. So 2008, well, even if you go 2009, it's 50% greater, more than 50% greater. It was 53 billion just a few years ago. How many people are being served, are getting this benefit today?
44.3 million people receive the benefit each month.
And do you know how many of that 44.3 million are able-bodied adults?
Yes, we can give you that. I know that just under half are children, another 10% are people with disabilities, another close to 10% are seniors, some adults, but we can give you the actual percentage, a very small percentage.
So half are kids, 10% are individuals with disabilities, 10% are seniors. So is that 30% or
no, it isn't 30%. It's about 10% are adults without dependents, able-bodied adults without dependents.
So over 4 million?
Correct, in that range.
Okay. And Ms. Mayhew, my understanding is you've taken that population you just talked about, at least the ones who live in the state of Maine, and you've put back in place a work requirement for able-bodied adults. Able-bodied adults, I assume, with no dependents. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And what's been your experience with that program?
So these are individuals between the ages of 18 and 49, not disabled, no dependents. And we reinstated the work requirements from the 1996 reforms. We did
exactly the same requirements that were working fine back then.
Correct.
20 hours a week. Got to some work requirements, some you got to show 20 hours a month or
20 hours
20 hours a week, excuse me, that's right.
But there are other options. It's 20 hours a week or working or being in a vocational training program or volunteering 1 hour a day.
So some options. All right, and what happened when you did that?
When we did that, we also reached out to all of these individuals through our Department of Labor career centers to offer them slots in programs to help them with work skills development, resume writing, opportunities to identify employment. We made over 12,000 phone calls to that population.
Hold on one second. Back up a second. What was the number in Maine when you, able-bodied adults 18 to 49 in the program? What was that number?
15,000.
15,000. What's the number? And you've implemented this program now several months?
We implemented that in the October 1st, 2014.
Okay, so a year and a half. And what have you seen happen? What's that? Was it 12,000 you said?
Yes. The vast majority did not come forward to demonstrate and comply.
So they're no longer in the program?
They're no longer in the program, but what is more important—
No, I'm asking, is that I would view that as a good thing. 'Cause my guess is what happened is they said, you know what, if I got to do all this job training, job requirement, why don't I just go get a job?
Exactly.
Imagine that.
And then we looked at their wages.
Right, and that's a good thing, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
And their wages have increased by over 114% from prior.
So you followed them up?
Yes, we did.
And Ms. Dean, is that not a good thing?
I think the question is, what's the counterfactual? How many of them would have gone and gotten jobs anyway? Because we know that there's a high—
But they did get a job, so that's a good thing, and they're no longer living off the taxpayer, right? So
it's
it's good for the taxpayer, and it's good for the individual. And you're saying, you're somehow implying, in questions I've heard from the other side, somehow that's not a good thing?
There's also a group of people who lost food assistance without a job.
Ms. Mayhew, what's that number?
I'm sorry, what was the comment?
She's saying that there's some of that 12,000 who are no longer getting food stamps who didn't get a job. Do you know what that number is?
We can get you that.
But the point is they could still get food stamps if they're willing to do the 3 options you gave them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, Ms. Dean, how's that negative?
I think there are many parts of the country where there are not part to full-time jobs
I'm asking you
available.
about Maine. I'm asking you about Maine because Maine's done it. That's the one experiment we have that I think is working win-win-win. Either they can do the job training, which is going to help them long-term and stay on food stamps, or they can do what most people did in Maine and say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to get a real job, right? And if they decide to opt out and can't get a job, they can always come back and go to one of those three options. So tell me what is negative about that. That seems to be helping that individual who was in the system get to a better position in life. And just as importantly, help treat taxpayers with the respect they deserve so someone's not living off their tax dollars who's able-bodied. Why is that wrong?
Representative Jordan, you're not characterizing the rule correctly across the country. States
I'm
are
talking
not
about the state of Maine.
I cannot speak to whether Maine genuinely offered every single individual, whether a slot was available for them to participate in, and whether those individuals were appropriately screened. The Commissioner Mayhew can best do that. But the problem is that across the country, that's not happening. It's operating as a time limit. So individuals living in high unemployment areas or individuals who face barriers to work. For example, in Florida, there were disabled veterans who didn't have a 100% disability rating who were terminated from the program. They were not exempted. Work requirement is very different.
We just
than
heard that it
timing.
wasn't, that this was not about people with disability. There's a big difference between able-bodied individuals between 18 and 49 with no dependents and someone with a disability and someone with children and someone who's a senior. There's a big difference. Okay, if I could, Mr. Chairman, one last question. What is the number today, Ms. Mayhew, that's in that category in Maine? What's the number? It was 12,000. What's the number today?
It is less.
Put your mic, please.
We can get you the final number, but obviously,
Less than what?
less than 1,000 individuals.
Okay.
It's unbelievable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.